Hello, my friends. Today I want to take you somewhere extraordinary. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine golden sunlight falling over the Nile, ships drifting into a royal harbor, marble palaces glowing under the Mediterranean sky. And inside one of those palaces, a young queen preparing to fight the most powerful empire on earth. This is not just a history lesson. This is a journey into power, into ambition, into love and betrayal, into danger, strategy, and survival. Her name was Cleopatra. When most people hear that name, they think of beauty. They imagine luxury, jewels, and romance. But Cleopatra was far more dangerous than beautiful. She was intelligent, educated, strategic. She spoke many languages. She understood politics like a master chess player. And in a world ruled by ruthless men and violent empires, she chose not to survive quietly, but to rule boldly. In this story, you will witness secret meetings inside dark chambers, powerful alliances that changed history, a romance that shook Rome, naval battles that decided the fate of nations, and one final decision that turned a queen into a legend. And as you listen, you are not only traveling back in time, you are also practicing your English. Clear storytelling, powerful vocabulary, emotional expression, history that feels alive. So take a deep breath. Let us walk into ancient Alexandria. Let us begin with a girl who refused to be ordinary. Chapter 1, The Daughter of Alexandria. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in the magnificent city of Alexandria. But to understand her, you must first see the city through her eyes. Alexandria was not simply a capital. It was a living symbol of power and knowledge. The Mediterranean Sea shimmered against its shores. Massive ships arrived daily, carrying silk from the east, gold from Africa, marble from Greece. The famous lighthouse stood tall, guiding sailors safely home, a beacon of brilliance in the ancient world. And at the heart of this city stood the great library. Scrolls, thousands upon thousands of scrolls, mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, medicine, history. The greatest minds of the ancient world gathered here. Now imagine a young royal girl walking through palace halls, only steps away from this ocean of knowledge. That girl was Cleopatra. She was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek royal family that had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries after Alexander the Great conquered the land. They were powerful, wealthy, but also disconnected from the Egyptian people. They spoke Greek. They followed Greek customs. Many never even learned the Egyptian language. Cleopatra changed that. From childhood, she showed unusual curiosity. While other royal children enjoyed entertainment and luxury, Cleopatra preferred conversation with scholars. She asked questions. She listened more than she spoke. She studied rhetoric, the art of persuasive speech. She studied politics, the art of survival. She understood something very early: knowledge is protection. She learned Greek, of course, but she also learned Egyptian. And not only Egyptian, historians believe she spoke several languages, possibly including Hebrew, Arabic, and Ethiopian dialects. This was not common for a ruler. Why did it matter? Because language builds trust. When Cleopatra spoke directly to Egyptian priests in their own tongue, she was not just communicating, she was building loyalty. She was sending a message: I see you. I respect you. Inside the palace, however, her world was far from peaceful. The Ptolemaic court was famous for cruelty and betrayal. Brothers married sisters to keep power within the bloodline. Family members plotted against one another. Poison was sometimes a political tool. Smiles could hide deadly intentions. Imagine growing up in that environment. Every dinner conversation might contain hidden threats. Every alliance could break overnight. Trust was fragile. But instead of becoming fearful, Cleopatra became observant. She watched how advisors influenced kings. She noticed how generals demanded loyalty. She saw how the people responded to strength and how quickly they turned against weakness. These were not simple childhood lessons, they were training. By the time she reached her teenage years, Cleopatra was not just a princess waiting for luxury, she was a strategist in preparation. She understood that Egypt's independence was fragile. Rome was rising in power, political storms were forming beyond the horizon, and deep inside, perhaps even as a young girl, she made a silent promise to herself: she would not be a puppet, she would not disappear into history, she would rule, and when the moment came, she would be ready. Chapter 2. Exile and the Birth of a Strategist. When Cleopatra was 18 years old, her father, King Ptolemy Seth, died. According to tradition, she was meant to rule Egypt together with her younger brother, Ptolemy Seth. On paper, it looked peaceful. A shared throne, a united royal family, stability for the kingdom. But reality inside the palace was far more dangerous. Power does not like to be shared. And in royal courts, partnership often hides rivalry. Cleopatra quickly discovered that although she wore the crown, she did not fully control it. Her brother was only a child, but he was surrounded by powerful advisors, older men who feared Cleopatra's intelligence and independence. They saw her not as a partner, but as a threat. A young woman who spoke boldly. A queen who refused to be silent. Slowly, quietly, they began to remove her influence. Official documents were issued in her brother's name alone. Coins were minted without her image. Her authority began to disappear line by line, signature by signature. Imagine the frustration. Imagine sitting on a throne, yet feeling it slip from beneath you. Then came the final blow. Cleopatra was forced to leave Alexandria, forced to leave the palace where she had grown up, forced to leave the city she loved. She became, in a single political move, an exile, a queen without a kingdom. For many rulers, exile means the end. It means weakness. It means defeat. But for Cleopatra, exile became education. She did not run into hiding. She did not waste her energy blaming fate. Instead, she stepped back and studied the board more carefully. From outside the palace walls, she could see the larger game. Egypt was not only fighting internal conflict, it was standing in the shadow of Rome. And Rome was divided by civil war. Cleopatra gathered loyal supporters near the eastern borders of Egypt. She built a small army. She strengthened relationships with regional leaders. Every move was careful. Every decision was strategic. She understood something powerful. Timing is everything. Inside Alexandria, her brother's advisors believed they had removed her permanently. But they underestimated her patience. Then destiny shifted. Rome's great general, Julius Caesar, arrived in Egypt while chasing his rival, Pompey. Suddenly, the most powerful man in the Roman world stood on Egyptian soil. This was not just a political event, it was an opportunity. Cleopatra saw what others did not. If she could win Caesar's support, she could win back her throne. But more than that, she could secure Egypt's future against Roman domination. Exile had not weakened her. It had sharpened her. The frightened young queen had transformed into something more dangerous, a strategist waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment was about to arrive. Chapter 3. The Carpet That Changed History. Rome was burning from within. Civil war had torn the Republic apart. Julius Caesar, the most powerful general of his generation, was chasing his rival Pompey across the Mediterranean. When Pompey fled to Egypt seeking refuge, he believed he would find safety. Instead, he found betrayal. Ptolemy Seth's advisors had Pompey executed, hoping to impress Caesar. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he was not pleased. Rome respected strength, but it also respected order. Egypt now looked unstable, divided, dangerous, and inside that chaos, Cleopatra saw her opening. She understood something critical. Caesar did not just want revenge. He wanted influence. He wanted Egypt stable under a ruler loyal to Rome. That ruler could be her. But there was a problem. The palace was controlled by her brother's forces. Cleopatra could not simply walk through the gates and request a meeting. She needed to surprise Caesar, to reach him before her enemies could stop her. So she chose boldness over fear. Under the cover of night, Cleopatra sailed quietly into Alexandria. The harbor that once celebrated her as queen now stood silent. She trusted only a few loyal servants. One of them carried a large carpet, or perhaps a heavy linen sack, as some historians suggest. Inside that fabric was not just a woman. Inside was a plan. The bundle was delivered to Caesar's private quarters as a gift. Roman guards watched carefully. The fabric was laid on the floor. The ropes were loosened. And slowly, dramatically, it unrolled. Out stepped Cleopatra. Imagine the moment. A young queen, only in her early 20s, dust from travel still on her skin, no army behind her, no crown on her head, only confidence. She did not throw herself at Caesar's feet. She did not beg for mercy. She spoke. She explained the injustice done to her. She described Egypt's instability. She presented herself not as a victim, but as the solution. Calm, intelligent, strategic. Caesar was nearly twice her age. He had seen battlefields soaked in blood. He had negotiated with kings and generals. But this was different. Cleopatra matched him in conversation. She understood Roman politics. She understood ambition. She understood that alliances are built on mutual benefit, not emotion. In that room, two powerful minds met, and history shifted. Caesar agreed to support her claim to the throne. War broke out inside Alexandria. Roman soldiers fought Egyptian forces in the streets. Fire spread through parts of the city. The struggle was fierce. Eventually, Ptolemy Ceauthe attempted to flee during battle near the Nile River. His boat capsized. He drowned. Cleopatra returned to the throne. But remember this carefully. This was not simply romance. This was political brilliance. In one daring act, Cleopatra had transformed herself from an exiled queen into Rome's chosen ally. She secured her crown. She protected Egypt, at least for the moment. And she proved something unforgettable. Sometimes, the boldest move is not made with an army. It is made with courage, timing, and a fearless mind. Chapter 4. Rome, Love, and Assassination. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar were now bound together, not only by politics, but by something far more personal. Their alliance had restored her throne, but it also created whispers across two continents. In Egypt, she was secure again. In Rome, however, power was fragile and constantly shifting. Soon, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy XV Caesar, known to history as Caesarion, Little Caesar. To Cleopatra, he was more than a child. He was a symbol, a living bridge between Egypt and Rome. Through him, she imagined a future where her dynasty would not merely survive, but expand. But dreams built on power must face reality. Cleopatra later traveled to Rome, an extraordinary move for a foreign queen. She stayed in a villa across the Tiber River, under Caesar's protection. Imagine her walking through the streets of Rome, the heart of the Republic. Senators in white togas, statues of gods, crowds whispering as she passed. Some Romans were fascinated by her intelligence and elegance. Others were deeply uncomfortable. She was foreign. She was powerful. And she had Caesar's attention. Rumors spread quickly. Was Caesar planning to make her his queen? Would he move the center of power eastward? Would Rome become something new, something more like a monarchy? Cleopatra understood the tension. She observed carefully. She knew Rome respected strength but feared domination. She remained composed, strategic, always aware that admiration could turn into hatred overnight. Then came March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March. The Roman Senate gathered. Caesar walked into the chamber, unaware that betrayal stood only inches away. Men he trusted surrounded him. Knives flashed. 23 wounds. The most powerful man in Rome collapsed at the foot of a statue. When the news reached Cleopatra, the ground beneath her shifted once again. The man who had secured her throne was gone. The political balance she depended on had shattered. Think about her position in that moment. A foreign queen, living in Rome, with a child connected to a murdered dictator. Danger was everywhere. Cleopatra did not panic. She acted. Quietly, swiftly, she left Rome and returned to Egypt. She understood something essential. Rome was entering another storm of civil war. And in storms, survival depends on distance and timing. Back in Alexandria, she tightened her control. She strengthened Egypt's economy. She prepared for uncertainty. She raised Caesarion not only as a prince, but as a symbol of legitimacy. The assassination of Caesar was not just a tragic event in Roman history. For Cleopatra, it was a harsh lesson. All alliances are temporary. All power is fragile. And if Egypt was to remain independent, she would once again need to choose her next move carefully. Very soon, another Roman leader would rise from the chaos, and Cleopatra would step onto the board once more. Chapter 5: The Queen and the Warrior. Mark Antony was not like Julius Caesar. Caesar was calculated, disciplined, controlled. Antony was fire. He was a decorated general, a loyal friend to Caesar, and a man who loved victory, celebration, and dramatic gestures. He was powerful, but he was also emotional. And in times of chaos, emotion can either inspire greatness or invite disaster. After Caesar's death, Rome split once again into rival factions. Antony rose as one of its dominant leaders, sharing power in an uneasy alliance with a young and ambitious man named Octavian. But alliances in Rome were never permanent. Suspicion grew quietly between them. Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, in modern-day Turkey. Officially, he wanted answers. He wanted to know why Egypt had not fully supported him during Rome's internal struggles. But Cleopatra understood the deeper truth. This meeting was about evaluation. Power studying power. And Cleopatra never entered a negotiation unprepared. She did not rush to him like a nervous ally. She arrived like a queen who knew her value. Her ship sailed up the river like something from a dream. Golden decorations reflected sunlight. Purple sails moved gently in the wind. The air carried perfume. Musicians played softly. Cleopatra appeared dressed as Isis, the Egyptian goddess of motherhood and magic. It was not vanity. It was strategy. She understood psychology. Before she even spoke, she created an image in Antony's mind. Wealth, mystery, divinity, confidence. She controlled the atmosphere. She turned a political meeting into a legendary entrance. Antony was captivated. But beyond attraction, he recognized strength. Cleopatra was not begging for protection. She was offering partnership. And their partnership made sense. Cleopatra needed Rome's military support to keep Egypt independent. Antony needed Egypt's wealth to fund his campaigns and strengthen his position against Octavian. Together, they could build something powerful, perhaps even reshape the balance of the Roman world. Their relationship grew quickly. They spent winters together in Alexandria. They held grand celebrations. They had children. But behind the luxury was constant political calculation. Cleopatra supported Antony's military campaigns in the East. Antony publicly recognized her children as rulers of various territories. This was not just romance, it was the building of an alternative power center outside Rome. And that terrified Octavian. In Rome, Octavian began a campaign of words instead of weapons. He used propaganda with precision. He painted Cleopatra as a manipulative foreign queen who had bewitched Antony. He claimed Antony had abandoned Roman values for Eastern luxury. Slowly, public opinion shifted. This was not simply a love story anymore. It was a battle for narrative, a battle for loyalty. a battle for the future of Rome itself. Cleopatra understood the danger. She knew that when perception changes, power follows, but by now she had chosen her side. She had invested everything, her kingdom, her children, her future, in this alliance. And as tension rose between Antony and Octavian, one truth became clear: the next conflict would not be fought in private chambers. It would be fought on the open sea. Chapter 6. Actium, the Fall of a Dream. In 31 BC, the sun rose over the Ionian Sea, casting a golden glow over hundreds of ships. Cleopatra's and Antony's fleets were lined up, a sea of sails and oars stretching to the horizon. The air smelled of salt and tension. Soldiers gripped their weapons, knowing that this battle would decide the fate of empires. The stakes could not be higher. If they lost, Egypt's independence and Antony's power would vanish. The battle began with clashing swords and cannon like catapults hurling fire across the waves. Antony's soldiers fought bravely, but Octavian's forces were disciplined, coordinated, and relentless. The sea became chaos, ships burning, men shouting, oars splintering, waves crashing over desperate warriors. Cleopatra's own ships glinted in the sun, adorned with gold and purple, a reminder that even in war she commanded elegance and power. As the fighting intensified, Cleopatra made a fateful choice. At the height of chaos, she ordered her ships to retreat. Some historians say it was fear, some say careful strategy to save her dynasty. Antony, bound by loyalty and love, followed her. Their retreat was a devastating blow to morale. Antony's forces were thrown into confusion. The battle that had begun with hope ended in disaster. Octavian seized the opportunity, claiming a decisive victory. Antony's allies abandoned him. Ships that had once bristled with power now floated empty or burned in the sea. The dream of an Eastern empire, united under Cleopatra and Antony, began to crumble. When news reached Alexandria, Cleopatra saw the shadow of defeat. She paced her chambers, contemplating her options. Every plan she had made, every alliance, every calculated risk, was now under threat. Octavian's army advanced relentlessly. The walls of Egypt might protect her palace, but not her destiny. Antony, faced with despair, attempted to rally his remaining forces. But the heart of his empire had faltered. He realized too late that Cleopatra's retreat had saved her life, but doomed their cause. In a mix of grief, honor, and hopelessness, Antony eventually fell, leaving Cleopatra to confront the enemy alone. In that moment, Cleopatra understood the ultimate truth about power. Even the strongest love and the greatest strategy cannot always control fate. Empires rise and fall, battles are won and lost, but courage and intelligence define how you meet the inevitable. And yet, even in the shadow of Actium, Cleopatra's mind was already thinking ahead. Survival, not despair, would guide her next moves. For she was still a queen, still a strategist, and the story of Egypt was far from over. Chapter 7. The Final Choice and Eternal Legacy. As Octavian's forces approached Alexandria, the air was thick with tension. The streets that once echoed with celebration now held whispers of fear. Cleopatra stood in her chambers, contemplating the unimaginable. Antony was gone, taken by despair after receiving false news of her death. His life ended in a tragic final act, leaving Cleopatra to face Rome's conqueror alone. She was a queen without an army, yet she carried the spirit of a pharaoh. The enemy wanted to parade her through Rome as a captive, turning her into a symbol of submission. For someone who had ruled proudly, who had commanded armies, who had negotiated with the most powerful men of the world, this was worse than death. And so, she made her final choice. Tradition tells us she allowed an asp, a venomous snake, to bite her. Others say it was poison. Regardless of the method, what matters is that Cleopatra chose her fate on her own terms. She would not be displayed as a trophy. she would not be diminished. She would act with courage, intelligence, and autonomy to the very end. In 30 BC, Cleopatra passed away, ending the era of the pharaohs. Egypt became a province of Rome, but her story survived. Her life teaches that leadership is never merely inherited. It is claimed through wisdom, courage, and bold action. Cleopatra faced betrayal, war, and the vast machinery of Rome, yet she shaped her destiny until the last breath. Her legacy is not beauty or luxury, it is strategy, intellect, and resilience. She mastered languages, politics, and alliances. She understood timing, perception, and influence. She wielded power with precision and courage, proving that a sharp mind can rival the mightiest empires. Let us learn from her life. Challenges may tower over us, alliances may crumble, yet preparation, knowledge, and courage allow us to face our own battles. Cleopatra walked into rooms of generals and senators unafraid. We too can stand tall. Legends are not remembered for crowns or jewels, but for the choices they make when fate tests them. Cleopatra was the last queen of Egypt, but she was more. A symbol of intelligence, ambition, and destiny shaped by courage. When you think of Cleopatra, remember the girl in Alexandria's libraries, the queen negotiating with emperors, the woman unafraid to define her own end. Her life tells us, destiny is not given, it is claimed. Learn, prepare, stand tall, write your story with courage, because true power belongs not only to empires, but to the bold who dare to claim it. Final words, more than beauty. Let us step back for a moment. Was Cleopatra perfect? No. Did she make risky choices? Yes. But look deeper. She ruled in one of the most dangerous political environments in history. She faced betrayal inside her own family. She stood against the Roman Empire, the greatest power of her time. And she did not survive by beauty alone. She survived by intelligence. She mastered languages to build loyalty. She studied politics to protect her throne. She formed alliances not out of weakness, but strategy. She understood that power is not only about strength, it is about influence, perception, timing. Cleopatra teaches us something powerful. You may not control the world you are born into, but you can control how prepared you become. You can sharpen your mind. You can learn deeply. You can observe carefully. You can speak with confidence. Cleopatra walked into rooms filled with generals and senators, and she did not shrink. Neither should you. Her life reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act anyway. Her story reminds us that intelligence is attractive, that knowledge is power, that strategy can change destiny, and even in her final moment, she made a choice. Not humiliation, not surrender, choice. That is why, more than 2,000 years later, we still speak her name, not as a symbol of beauty, but as a symbol of ambition, of resilience, of bold thinking, of destiny shaped by courage. And here is where your journey begins too. With English Mindshift, you can approach learning as Cleopatra approached life, with strategy, boldness, and purpose. Each story you explore, each lesson you practice sharpens your mind, grows your confidence, and opens new worlds in English. This is more than studying words, it is stepping into a new, advanced way to think, express, and understand. So when you think of Cleopatra, imagine a young girl studying in Alexandria, a queen negotiating with emperors, a woman unafraid to define her own destiny, and know that you too can claim your path. Learn, prepare, and rise with courage. Embrace every lesson with English Mindshift, and make your journey legendary. Your story begins now. Step into it, claim it, and write it with boldness and wisdom.